Hello, everyone. A massively warm welcome from me, Emma Thompson, in rather a cold, wet Glen in Scotland. To everyone watching, the launch of our new film, which is so exciting, A Message from the Future, Part 2, The Years of Repair. So I'm one of four narrators, and we'll be talking to two of the other narrators and one of the co-creators. It's been online for a few hours now, so I hope you've managed to see it. And it's, of course, the sequel to the brilliant Message from the Future from Alexandria I'm getting confused with Guile, Ocasio-Cortez, which was an incredible film which moved me so much. I wanted to be a part of this next one. That film, the first Message from the Future, was seen by 12 million people and was nominated for an Emmy. So it's well worth catching that as well if you can. Both of these films are incredibly hopeful. And that's kind of hard to come by in these days. It's quite a dystopian time, I find, and funnily enough, as an actor, I've just been in a dystopian vision of the future, which portrays crisis after crisis, climate exploitation of workers in every area, a populist leader who becomes fascist and locks migrants into camps and introduces diseases in order to cull them. And while we were making it, the actors and I, we were very fearful, actually, because it seemed less prescient than actually present. But at this moment in time, dystopia's begone, because today and at this time, it's the evening for me because I'm in Scotland. Well, it's always evening in Scotland, really, in October, because it's raining. We've made a world that imagines and envisions a place where we've actually listened to what the pandemic and all the other crises that we're facing are actually telling us, and that we've taken action, and that there is a hopeful, sustainable, achievable future. Because whilst there's no question about the fact that so much is broken and there's so much suffering and a great deal of despair at the moment, there is to be had a great deal of joy and a great deal of healing in the work of repair. So let's now just look at a clip from the film which can kick off the discussion between the guests on tonight's launch, which I'm very excited to start and to introduce you to them. So let's go for that clip now, please.
Looking back, it's hard to believe that we've rebuilt our community from the ground up with our own hands. The first seeds were planted way back in the terror and tenderness of the pandemic. And then change bloomed in the streets, in the fire and struggle of the uprisings. Around here, we'll never forget the day that the last prisoners were released, walking out into the arms of their loved ones. The easy part was finding work. The Community Care Corps was always looking for people in those days, whether for universal family care, burying border walls, or green new public housing, going up one pod at a time. Yep, it was a good time for busy hands.
Funny, thinking back to the first wave of the pandemic, that's what you really remember. Hands. Washing, scrubbing, disinfecting, washing again. Picturing each other's hands, all the hands that had touched whatever we were touching. The hands that packed the box, that picked the tomato, that planted the seed. The hands that stroked the brow, that said goodbye. The hands were us. All of us. That web of hand-to-hand, breath-to-breath relationships was a reminder. We are all entangled, making each other sick, keeping each other alive. That was just one of the lessons of COVID-19.
So those were the opening moments of the Message from the Future Part 2, The Years of Repair, which is online now for everyone to see. The hands that you see in the pictures are the hands of the great artist and political activist Molly Crabapple. She's absolutely extraordinary. Directed by her brilliant team, Kim Vickbinder and Jim Batt, and it's presented by The Intercept as well as The Leap which is an organization co-founded by R.V. Lewis, and the extraordinary visionary sage of the world, Naomi Klein.
Hello, Emma. Thank you so much for doing this. And, you know, it's so interesting what you're talking about, that dystopian future. Years and Years, which anyone who hasn't seen Years and Years, it's an HBO series in which Emma, I think we've got a big audio problem, so I'm going to pause. Yeah.
No, I don't hear you. I can hear you okay, actually. Okay. Don't you just love this? Oh, it's an echo, Travis says.
Horrible, terrifying Trumpian prime minister. You know, I think it is one of the most effective dystopian visions of the future, and I found it really, really harrowing and watched it right before the pandemic. But it is true that these prophecies of a dystopian future have started to feel just a little bit too close to home, and at a certain point, it starts to feel like, you know, are we locked in to this future that we keep imagining, right? And then you know, you add the sort of some kind of apocalyptic fantasies that we're getting from religious fundamentalists who are like, they've got their apocalyptic checkbook. They're like, floods check, fires check, disease check. All right, the end times are here. You know, keep praying, and you know, the good ones will be saved and everybody else will be left behind. And it's like, that's what's being enacted down here, right? There's almost a way in which by repeating these fantasies, we might be making them come true. We have to be careful. So I'm just so grateful to everybody who came together and suspended disbelief in this grim time and decided to hope with us, because it's not about being sure we can build that world. It's just, if we don't imagine it, we definitely won't, right?
No, absolutely. That's so true. The importance of story in this moment in time and imagining a better future, because as someone said, if you can't see it, you can't become it, you can't be it. Now, another of our guests, thanks, Naomi, obviously we'll be coming back to you in any minute. Our next guest is one of my great heroines, Opal Tometi, whose voice you heard in the beginning. And of course, she's one of the 3 women who founded Black Lives Matter. And she's just extraordinary. She spent a decade as the executive director of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, which is in fact the first immigrant rights organization for people of African descent in the US. She's an incredible writer, leader, a transcendent feminist freedom fighter. Welcome, Opal. The next voice you heard on the clip was Guile Garcia Branal, who's not here because he's shooting something in a hurricane, which is typical of him. He's a brave, great activist actor, and he sends all his best, but he can't be here. But we are joined by the other narrator, whose gravelly tones add an incredible weight to the film, the wonderful Nigerian poet and activist Nnimmo Bassey. I'm trying to say it properly, but he says everyone calls him Nnimmo, so I'll just do that. He's in Nigeria. He's led environmental justice struggles in the global south for decades. He was the CEO of Friends of the Earth International. That must have been hard. The executive director of Environmental Rights Action for 2 decades, and a laureate of the Alternative Nobels, the Right Livelihood Award. Amazing. So welcome, everyone. The film team's also got an extraordinary alliance of partners, and we'll give you details and links to all of them later, because they're going to be a great way in once you've seen the film and you want to take action, which you will. Naomi, so first of all, just going back to you for a second, many congratulations. You've been working towards this right from the beginning of the pandemic. So just and not too long, because we haven't got that long and there's so much to talk about. But just briefly tell us how that journey started. What was it? What's it been like?
As I said before, it's a tough time to stay hopeful. And we started off, talking with Molly, and all of us locked in our homes. Molly, from the earliest days, was doing these beautiful portraits of essential workers, and worked with a friend to project them onto the sides of closed down office buildings in Manhattan. So we first started, but I mean, to be honest, we were having trouble figuring out how to do this. We knew we should do something like this, but then the uprisings started. And it was clear where the hope was going to come from. And that's when we reached out to Opal. And that's when we started, that's when the real magic started.
Okay. In fact, let me bring Opal in. Can I bring Opal in right now? Because, you were right in the middle, the thick of this extraordinary uprisings that I was watching from a little glen in Scotland with my sheep, just going, oh my God, and upending the political status quo. So why did you, in the middle of all of that, being right in the thick of it, decide to become part of an art project after all? During these incredibly high stakes moments for you. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Opal.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Right, this is I think this is a really important question, and it was my honor, and I just see you all on the screen, and I'm like so deeply honored to be part of this project, because I mean, each of you are people that I've looked to for direction, for guidance, for mentorship, whether you knew it or not. I've looked at your body of work over the years as I've kind of grown and evolved within my own social movement contributions. And I know that we do need stories to help us understand what's occurring right now. We're stuck even within a narrative that's occurring in the world, but we have the power, we have the agency to intervene in the status quo narrative. And that's what I felt was the opportunity with this project when Naomi reached out and Avi reached out, and I was like, oh, I see where you're going with this. And even in the middle of, two pandemics essentially, right? Like, you have three: health, economic, racial injustice, and all of that compounded, and of course, racial inequity being a common thread through it all. It was absurdly clear to me that we needed to cast a vision of what's possible, and we needed it to be multifaceted and to be one that addresses some of the root issues that we've been grappling with for so long. And so what I loved about the project was that there was no apologies with that. And what I know about Naomi's body of work is that that's what you do all day. And that's what I've been doing as well. So for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. Make space to cast vision, but also to seed into my own sense of resilience and hope that I personally need in the middle of these kinds of uprisings that are happening all over. But just on a deeply personal level where I'm being asked a million questions or being, going here and there and being part of all sorts of strategy sessions and beyond, and really needing to tap into what is the future going to look like in a very real way, and being somebody who's been grounded in the reality of helping to shape that and to organize communities to face the concerns and the crises that are in front of us. It felt deeply important to say, okay, even with that knowledge, what could be? And what have we been talking about? And how can we forecast what is possible given what we've been demanding for so many years? So
for sure. It's so visionary, isn't it, this film? And it's so important to create ideas. You said in one of your talks, Naomi, you said there's all these ideas hanging around, and the right have them in their back pockets. Oh, this would be a good moment. The shock doctrine's very clear. Some people say, oh, let's take this moment to do that bad thing that's not going to help anybody but make everybody else rich. This seems to me is absolutely one of those nexi of crises that's doing that. Have we got you back, Nnimmo? Good, you're there. you sent me a message saying my internet is a bit unstable, and I thought I'm unstable. Never mind the internet. I'm so glad to have you back. You're amazing in the film. Like I say, you add such gravitas and weight. This version, the part 2 is much more global. It was launched in Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, French, and English. So, sort of to Opal's point, actually, how does it connect for you, having led those struggles in the global South for so long? Why did this speak to you so powerfully?
Well, thank you so much. I was really excited to team up with the incredible people working on this film together. What really excited me was that this movie brought about all the poetry, fine arts, and then everything came to the music. Everything came together. So it's very rare to find. And then we were invisible. To me, this was the greatest part, because this is a lesson I learned from the pandemic, that we cannot be visible all the time. And then being in these projects, just the voice and not being seen was amazing for me, because I'm learning personally. Although it's a big challenge when you're working with grassroots activists and grassroots communities, you have to be with them physically. But then the kind of challenge we're having from the pandemic, I found that we have to find a way of being present without being visible. And I think this was a great thing. So again, connecting in the global South, we need stories. Stories very critical. And in fact, globally, stories rule the world. The economic system we're running is drawn up by stories. People believe that something has to be exchanged as money, and then we call it money. A story comes that it should be this value, and then we place a value on it. And we really need to seize the moment and take over the narrative, take over the story. And this is what really excited me about being a part of this project. And I think it's been an amazing experience.
I think I hear you, but I also, for me, the most important thing is this interconnectivity, making connections, joining the dots. Everything that we do in racial justice, climate justice, food inequalities. Here in my country, there's a great deal of poverty. Everything is connected, and I think it's terribly difficult for people to make those connections, because it's like when you're asked that terrible question, what's your favorite charity, which is like being asked, what's your favorite war zone? What are you talking about, favorite charity? Everything is connected. We can't stay in our silos, and it's very tempting, because people get quite sort of protective about the places where they're struggling from. And even though they share the same goals and purposes as other organizations, it's quite hard for them to come together and act together. So, Naomi, my question for you, because you've been forging intellectual connective tissue for many decades now. I mean, you're a great mentor for me. The jurisdiction of your mind is so extraordinarily illuminating. So how did you find gathering the threads of all those amazing launch partners? Because I've never seen that before.
Wow. So it is, I was really thrilled to work with Opal on this, because I know that Opal is one of those people who is just like always trying to get people out of the boxes. And, we have co-written before, and I think we all kind of understand that it is all connected, but we're all existing within structures, including economic structures, that try to keep us in these boxes, and in some ways kind of reward us for being in these boxes, right? And then we're in this moment where it's like every disaster has every other disaster within it. That's absolutely true of COVID, but look at the wildfires. By the way, talk about the problem with prophecy. That image that you showed at the beginning with Molly painting this sort of burnt orange red wash, right? That was before the skies over Oregon turned that exact color. I texted Molly when those images started circulating. I'm like, we can't, like, the reality is now matching the film precisely, right? So but look at those fires, right? It's climate change, it's theft of indigenous land, it's suppression of indigenous knowledge, it's firefighters paid $1 an hour because they are prisoners as part of the mass incarceration crisis. I mean, it's so absurd that we try to put ourselves in boxes. Here we are in boxes, but as we all know, we'd rather be together because humans don't belong in boxes. And what Nnimmo said really resonates with me so much, that in this time where we have been so isolated, doing a project that allowed us to see each other was so important. And the same as you asked, Emma, that we have this launch coalition, right? And the vision of the future that we portray is not one that we for Black Lives is a visionary movement that is calling for a transfer of funds from incarceration and policing and violence to the infrastructure of care. And so we just went to the people who inspired the vision and said, do you want to partner? And so, yeah, we had this amazing group, Dream Defenders Movement for Black Lives, NDN Collective, Amazon Watch, Greenpeace, Global Nurses United, Institute for Policy Studies, Via Campesina, the global network of small farmers. And it's not for nothing. It's like all we did was just listen. And Molly's brilliance, painted it into reality. And it's just like, it's a tool, right? I mean, we're just trying to inspire people and give organizers a tool. When we did the first one, it was very much for like the Sunrise Movement and the climate justice movement. And, we'll see what happens with this. What do you think will happen, Opal? Do you think
I mean, but you said so much that I want to, just affirm, but I'll say this. I'm in this moment reminded of that quote by Audre Lorde, where Audre says, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives, right? And I feel like that really captures what we were trying to do with this project. Like, we know that, we know that we care about all these, various things that are coming up in our lives, or these various strands of issues, or seemingly strands of issues. And we have that insight, we have that analysis, we have that assessment. But when and where will we have the opportunity to share a new type of narrative that allows us to weave some of these insights that we have, but also to cast that vision, right? That's informed by our experience, informed by the demands that have emerged from social movements. And I honestly, I feel like where I see us going is towards more projects that look like this, more campaigns and strategies that allow us to thread these various insights that we've had from different movement sectors. I hate that we have to think about it in that way, but that's kind of how it's been. And like you said, we've been incentivized over the years to be in these silos. However, I think what has happened now with the pandemic, with the uprisings, with the climate disaster, with everything is on our doorsteps, we recognize that we can't stay in these silos, that we're going to have to forge partnerships, coalitions that grapple with all of it, right? That grapple strategically with all of it. And that's fine. And we deserve it. And we have all sorts of brilliant minds, courageous people, spiritual people who are able to help design the solutions that work for all of us. I feel that in my bones. I feel that, as I rewatched the film this morning, I was just moved to tears because it reflects the breadth of who we are, the breadth of our humanity, and is unapologetic with it, as well as honors the work, the legacy of struggle, the legacy of intellectual rigor and labor that so many have put forth, and captures it in a way that I think is hopefully compelling, and I hope can move throughout the world and inspire people to keep going, especially in this time where we have these elections looming over our heads, and it feels very heavy and very hard. But we need hope, and we have to stay disciplined in looking for and defining our hopeful places.
That's true. Islands of sanity is what we need. And we need to connect them with bloody great land masses as well. Nnimmo, how do you see it from where you're sitting? How does that film resonate with your experience of all that racial justice, climate justice struggle that you've been dealing with? Can you speak to that a little bit? Oh, we can't hear you. Can't hear you, darling.
I was muted, I'm sorry. But that's not my other name. I'm not muted. I must congratulate brothers and sisters in the United States, pressing for social and racial justice. Because, when we hear about the struggle, or we see the struggles on the screens, and we hear the stories, and especially one phrase that resonates with can't breathe. We have this. Africa cannot breathe because of the kind of impact we're having from transnational exploitations that is going on. So you see the struggles at individual level, collective level. You also see the same struggle manifesting across the continents. And in fact, in this project, when we see the politicians, the fumes from the fossil fuels, personally, that really resonates with me because one of the biggest crime scenes in the world today are the oil fields and the gas fields, the tar sand fields. So these are not just crimes for today. They lower the resilience of communities, of people, to withstand pandemics and other diseases that may occur. And they just simply destroy the environment without thinking about the future. And so the components, the composition of this story captures everything we're struggling for. Basic human rights, the right to save jobs, the right to be protected by the system. We keep hearing that government has no business being a business, but the business of government is to provide the social fabric to support citizens. And so
oh, we've lost him again. He's just, well, he's a long way away. Okay, so let's go. Oh, you're back. Carry on. You were saying exactly. It was so brilliant.
I think something is trying to sabotage my participation. And this must be the dinosaurs in government. And we need to topple. Yeah, we need to topple them like the statues that have been falling. We need to, because the project, the movie really challenges our thinking and should challenge also the thinking of political leaders, because they need to look at what is being said and know and realize that looking back from the future and all this struggle had to go before we get to where we got to, we don't need to suffer that much. We can get it sooner. We can get it quicker, and we can do what needs to be done much faster by, of course, mobilizing and opening up and removing the coloniality, the mindset that has ravaged the world and destroyed so many things.
Yes. Can we talking about destruction, can we just quickly all have a little word about the wonderful word in the title, which I love so much because it reminds me of my granny mending socks. It reminds me of my granny getting little old bits of wool and making little squares of crochet, which she made into blankets that are still on our bed. That I came from a line of women who mended things. And I became someone who said, oh, I've got a hole in my socks, I'm going to go buy a new pair of socks, because I had just forgotten, I had lost contact with that tradition of mending, repairing. And whilst a sock is a small example, it still leads to the built-in obsolescence in our computers, in our phones, which is destroying so many people's lives, actually. So can we talk about just repair, whoever wants to take that and run with it?
Where?
Go.
I was happy to see one of the people who kind of inspired it tweeting out the film today, Reverend William Barber, who leads the Moral Mondays movement, and wrote a book called The Third Reconstruction, right? And I think the thing about the reason why we chose that word is because it has a lot of different meanings, and I think what Opal was saying about the interconnection of all of these issues. They're there, but because we live in a society that puts us in the boxes, I think one of the things that art can do is make them more visible and find those threads, like the one that your grandma used to use. And so I think repair is a thread. It's one of those threads. It's one of the threads that we need to use to weave together, not a list, but a story, right? As Nnimmo said, the world is made with stories. And one of the big problems we have is that, you go to hear a speech by a politician, even the most progressive politician, it's usually just a list where they're checking off this group, that group, that group, but they're not telling another story to compete with these very destructive stories that we hear, from those dinosaurs, right? Which is, people deserve what they get, and deserve to be where they are, and maybe it's God's will. And they've got some powerful stories on their side. So we need more than lists. We need narratives. And I think that repair, it connects the need to repair our physical infrastructure, and recovering from what Ruth Wilson Gilmore calls organized abandonment, right? So it isn't everyone's infrastructure that is destroyed. The people who died from COVID in New York hospitals were, yes, there are the pre-existing conditions, and yes, there are the ways that racism wages war on Black bodies, but there's also the way that neoliberalism has waged war on the hospitals that serve Black people and brown people. And the numbers are really clear on this. Like the ratio of patient to nurse in the public hospitals had a huge impact on who lived and who died during COVID, right? So we need to repair, and reparations needs to shape how and where we repair. So that's a little of it. I'd love to hear Opal on it. Yeah, what is repair?
Yeah, I mean, I think that last bit that you were getting to is really where I think about repair and the meaning of it and how it applies. So I'll say this, that so often people think about Black Lives Matter and our movement about it being one that's just about stop killing Black people. Like they think that's like the baseline, right? But what we've been inviting people into is looking way beyond that. It's not just stop the killing, right? But repair the harm, right? Repair the damages that have been done to our communities that have been for so many generations actively disenfranchised, actively infringed upon, actively decimated through policies, through various practices, through different leaders, whether Republican or Democrat, through corporations, transnational corporations and beyond. And so for us, it's more about having an honest conversation about what it means to achieve justice, right? Real justice looks at the process of repair, not just stopping the bleeding, but how do we heal the body that has been afflicted with a particular wound, right? How do we restore it back to health and make it viable to engage in a larger society? That's what we're looking at right now. And I believe that repair is the priority framework that we must have. Repair in and of itself is a narrative. I think Naomi were kind of alluding to that. It is its own type of narrative where there has been a narrative that's more the status quo narrative that BLM had to make an intervention on, right? Which was, Black folks don't matter. We're not really talking about that. We have our first Black president, and we're post-racial. We don't talk about race. We're silent about these issues. But we quite literally had to say, no, we're making an intervention with our very bodies. But with doing that, we're also making a narrative intervention where the media had to finally engage. We used tools of social media and beyond to tell those stories. We used our own direct action and beyond to make that intervention. And that story now is about, yes, stop the crime, stop the murder, stop all of that. But you must repair the damage that's been done, not only at the hands of the criminal justice or criminal legal system, but this is about our healthcare systems. This is about jobs. This is about education. This is about every sphere of our lives. And if you miss that, then you miss the whole significance and the profundity of what BLM truly is about. So repair is so central. And so I was so moved to see that so prominent, both in the title, but also as a theme for how we laid out the entire short film.
And Nnimmo and Opal, that when we think about the actual journey, what I love as well about the film is that it's not utopian. It's not a sort of wild-eyed visionary view. Actually, what it's about is discipline and hard work, because actually organizing is so much hard work. I mean, you, Nnimmo, and you, Opal, you've done so much of that with your lives, and you know how demanding that is, how draining it is. And what is fascinating about the film is how detailed the number of struggles are. For instance, the community care called the viral rent strikes, for heaven's sakes, they're hard work to organize. You've got to get people, up there and out there and on the streets. So I suppose my question is, given the film portrays and paints all these mass movements that you've both been part of, with the end result that governments actually take notice of what people are saying and fear the streets rather than the other way around. Is that the way you see it happening? This say we can get there. What's the road going to be like?
One of the comments I saw on Twitter today was somebody who said he doesn't like happy endings. Almost like saying this ended so beautifully. So I think really, if it ends the way where this ended, that would be beautiful. But I also see a situation where I think it should end pretty much the way this ended. I'm seeing a situation where the mass movements would not only just be on the streets, but would be in a position to make decisions. That the mass movements would meet in the democratic ways in the public spaces and really feel what needs to be done and gets done. So it would not be, it would be a situation where those who are now almost seeing government offices as personal properties would learn that, look, everybody has a fall in line. We have to learn to work together to feel each other, to repair. That term repair, I think that was so carefully chosen, the title of this, because a lot needs to be repaired. We need to repair our relationship, as we said, one another. We need to repair relationship with nature, with Mother Earth, because we've been so disconnected from nature. We now think that we can make nature more efficient, we can make nature more productive. People are thinking of genetically engineering crops that can have higher levels of photosynthesis. I mean, all these are crazy things. The fact that you could do things doesn't mean that you must do them. We have atomic bombs, so don't go blowing them up everywhere. And so I believe that it will end close to what has been depicted.
Yeah.
Do you think that's
yeah, I would just say also, like, what I loved so much about it was that it illustrated, right? We illustrated the work that it's going to take, right? We weren't like, we didn't jump over what is required to get to that, new world or that alternative ending to the story. Because there is a story that's happening right now, and it has a particular trajectory and a particular ending. But I think what's so powerful and beautiful with what social movements are doing right now is saying, we're aware of our power, we're aware of our agency, we're aware of that we are the ones who make this thing work. And if we take action, we can shift the balance of power. We can shift things, we can move things, and we can really impact the outcome of this story. This is going to have to be sustained over time, over years. There will be lessons, there will be experiments. That is what it is. It's what it's always been. However, I think that this short film kind of captures that and reminds us that is part of the journey. And I've been sitting with the fact that about a month, almost 2 months ago, the New York Times declared Black Lives Matter as the largest movement in history. And a lot of folks have been like, yeah, wow, how do you feel? A lot of excitement. And I feel that excitement, and I feel really moved because there have been millions of people who've been moved to action. But what I always want to remind folks about is that we need to sustain that. We need to join community organizations. We need to join groups, and maybe it's a faith group, maybe it's a political campaign, maybe it's something else. But we have to ground our values in actual organizing and actual institution building, so that we can shift power, so that we can quite literally write a new story for our lives and for our future. And in so many ways, I feel like this reminds us of the fact that there's work to do. There's no magical one. It foregrounds us as the protagonists of this new world, right? Of this alternative ending. And to me, that is powerful. It is exactly what we need to be reminded of. I think it transforms our understanding of who we are in these moments. And I hope that people are going to be so moved by what they witness to deepen their commitment to a community organization or to a campaign or to a group.
You know, there's a great freedom songwriter called Victor Hara who said once during the 1970s, he said, this in Chile, this is where the potatoes are burning. And I've always loved that phrase because it means this is where the exciting thing is happening. This is where ideas that your hands are burning, the potatoes are burning. And actually, that's what this needs to be. This space, what we've been discussing, the film is a kind of, it's a spark, it's a fire, it's a flame, and it's for everyone to bring their potatoes to.
Right.
It's got to be exciting. This work has to be exciting. It can't be seen as a drag or a drain. And a lot of the people who need the work to be done are already exhausted by the unpaid labour that they're already engaged in. Isn't that the case? So trying to make it as exciting as possible is very important too. And I think the film, it really, really helps with that. It's so uplifting without being, falsely comforting.
Right. And I think one of the things we have to remember about this time, and I'm really struck by the amount of activists and people in the streets in the US, but I know this is happening around the world. I think about Zimbabwe and Lives Matter and other social movements and uprisings that are happening around the world. But there is a very real backlash that's also occurring. And I don't want to be naive about the fact that there are real consequences when people have the audacity to stand up, right, and assert their human dignity and take it to the streets. There are real consequences. We're seeing the ways in which the Trump administration has unleashed all sorts of military presence within our neighborhoods and our communities. We've seen the ways in which our local law enforcement already have military-grade equipment on hand, and how willing they are to use it against protesters. We've seen the ways in which, tear gas, rubber bullets have one of my friends just shattered his entire face. We've seen that. We've seen, white vigilantes and latest organizations come out and literally using their cars to drive through protests or just going out and shooting protesters, right? So I think, while I am definitely all about making it exciting and it is the wave, right? So right now what's amazing is that it is the cool thing, which I never thought we would see. I'm glad to see that it is. But it's not without consequence. It's not without risk. And for those of us who are in a position to continue to remind the larger public that we must defend dissidents, defend protesters, that protest is so central to making democracies healthy. It is our right to be able to assert our discontent and concerns. And it's our right to not be treated with such disdain, such disrespect, such disregard that we're experiencing right now at the head of the administration, but also local law enforcement that's brutalizing protesters even now. I imagine that we might see more of that. And I know that even in the wake of the pandemic around the world has actually made it really difficult for many human rights activists across the world to organize. that there are other authoritarian regimes that are using the pandemic as a tool, essentially, to suppress, other voices. So I think there's a lot going on right now. I want to keep an eye on, multiple things, but remind us that this is our right, this is our duty. There's no way out of this mess without a struggle. There's no other way. We have to get out of the status quo that we've been in for far, far too long. And I'm glad to see the scales of apathy have been lifted off of so many people's eyes, but we got to keep going, and it's going to take some time. But I encourage folks to stay resilient and encouraged and stay in community. So we're reminded that there are people who think like you, who believe like you, who know that another world is possible, and who are willing to work towards that other world.
So you feel hopeful, Opal?
Some days, okay. But I'll say this: I don't actually think hope is a feeling anymore. I think, like my, dear friend and somebody that I really look up to, Marian Kaba, she says, hope is a discipline, and I kind of orient to hope in that way now, where yes, I see some glimmers of just opportunity or possibility, and so that makes me smile and it lights me up. But as an organizer, as an activist, as a person who's committed to human rights and social justice, it's just my way of life. It's not a mood, it's not a feeling, it's just how I orient to the world, period. So by virtue of being alive, I think something else is possible, that I have some sort of power, there's a reason for my being, and so I act like it. I act like my life matters, and the lives of people that I love matter, and so I'm willing to do the work to ensure that we're respected. So it's not a feeling, but it's just how I be.
That's great. Hope is a discipline. I love it. Someone said recently, kindness is an act of resistance these days. Which I
what did they say?
Kindness is an act of resistance. That there's so much unkindness in the systems that control our world at the moment. Really, it's a sort of normality, actually. So it resonates with me when you say hope is a discipline. Naomi, what about you? And Nnimmo, what about you? Just a little word on hope.
I think it's something we have to earn. We earn it with our actions.
Right.
It's not, we don't have a right just to have it in our back pocket, And yeah. I always I don't love the word hopeful, because I don't feel full of it. I feel lots of other things as well as hope. But I do think we have to earn it. And it is something we really struggled with as we were imagining this future. And, Molly, who obviously we owe so much to, and it's, she's our world builder. And Molly has been parts of lots of uprisings, right? In the Arab Spring and in Greece, after the financial crisis and Occupy Wall Street, and was pushing us like, well, what's making this different than these other moments of sort of effervescent uprising? And I think the answer to that is workers. And this is something that I think is that we are, yes, protests are important, but if you look at the film, it starts with essential workers and essential labor becoming visible through the pandemic, where we live in a culture that tries to disappear the work that is essential to life, whether it is the work of care or whether it's the work of the pollinators. We disappear all of this labor, right? We don't value it. But COVID forces the culture. Who touched this thing I'm touching, right? That beautiful sequence with the hands, right? And that, I believe, is where a lot of the hope rests, right? Because those are the hands that make the world run, right? And if they stop working, and if they're in the streets, and if we're doing more, and this is the part that Nnimmo says, doing more than clapping, but actually being in the streets, that's where the intersection of power, I think, becomes something different than what we've seen, right? So I want to be clear that we're not just saying, hey, let's have a big protest and everything will be fixed. I think we're talking about using all the levers of collective power, right? And really standing with the people who make the world work.
Yeah.
And I guess just one last thing, and that's, frankly, why we're so excited about this coalition, having the Global Nurses Union with us, having Public Services International with us, representing so many essential workers around the world, and groups representing the natural world, like Amazon Watch and Greenpeace International, right? I mean, it's all different kinds of labor. I keep thinking about this thing where Avi and I made a film in Argentina after the financial crisis called The Take. And there's this slogan that we heard when we were in Argentina, which was, our dreams don't fit on your ballots, right? And we are in this moment, as Opal said, the stakes are so high. There's a white supremacist in the White House. He's refusing to condemn armed white militias in the streets who are already, as Opal said, ramming their cars into crowds of people demanding justice for Black people who've been murdered by the police. It's a really, 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 really scary moment. And, I was a Bernie surrogate. I was part of the Bernie campaign, and the confluence of events of Bernie's campaign, losing to Biden in the moment that the pandemic hit, it was bleak, right? I mean, like it was hard to conjure some hope, and I think my wish for this is that as we make these very important, pragmatic, life-saving, and here I'm talking, in the U.S. context, I'm a U.S. a Canadian citizen. I'm just, voted in the U.S. elections, and a lot of us are making pragmatic. We're casting ballots for politicians who do not represent our dreams, who do not represent what we know is necessary to survive. But yet we will vote for them because they are the only thing standing between us and fascism. But we can't let that end there. Like, we need an image of what doesn't fit on that ballot. And so this is one little piece of an attempt to just have that out there in this moment where we are making those pragmatic decisions, so many of us.
So I'm hearing that hope is a discipline from Opal, which I love, that we have to earn hope from Naomi. So, Nnimmo, can you close this amazing discussion by giving your feelings or your hope on hope in the same way as the girls have done? Can't hear you. Oh God, I've lost all hope suddenly. Wait, no, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. I so want to hear you as well.
I think I'm being muted, but okay, good. Hope is one of the things we must never lose, or must not allow anyone or any system steal from us, because with hope we can always organize, and we really must be bold to say no to whatsoever we don't agree with. If you don't agree with the thing, say you don't agree with it. If you agree with it, be bold enough to say yes to it. I believe there are so many things we don't necessarily accept that people have been silent over, and so the system keeps getting more vicious because people are not speaking up. So we must all sow the seeds of liberty to say no, this is not acceptable. Even in moments when you don't have a clear alternative, saying no is an alternative. Because if you don't say no, then you have to stick to what you have, and you cannot complain about it. So I have the hope in the human capacity to withstand evil, the human capacity to withstand and to overcome evil, not to withstand evil, to overcome oppression, to overcome what kind of system? Systems have come and gone. And I believe that the broken system that we have now has got to get to a terminal point. And this would happen by having these seeds of resistance from different parts of the world coming together. It's a global solidarity. This is what we've got to use to demolish the knee that is being pressed on our necks. We can't wait any longer.
Yeah. So that seems to me to be a form of hope as integrity, actually, and always saying, no matter where you are and what small situation you might be, if something wrong happens, you speak it, you say it, you shout it out. I think that's key as well as a sort of long-term feminist. Let's not just be so nice. We've just got to call it when it happens. You know what I mean? I can't thank you all enough for this. We are out of time. Thank you, Nnimmo. Thank you, Opal. Thank you, Naomi. I kiss the hem of all your garments. A special and huge shout as well to the rest of the full family, to Archie, who's probably been watching this teeth chattering, and the crew at the Leap, Molly and her team, everyone at Intercept, especially Travis, who dealt with my panics on a regular basis, and to see the whole film. I think Travis is going to put up a link. And if it moves you, if any of what you've heard has moved you to take part, which I'm sure it has, and if you feel urgency about it, there are an extraordinary constellation of partners. And in many ways, the film's a kind of love letter to them, because the film is all about the work they are already doing. So this is not in our imagination, it's not made up, it's all happening now, and you can join in. So there's the Movement for Black Lives, there's Public Services International, La Via Campesina, the NDN Collective, Amazon Watch, Greenpeace International, Global Nurses United, Sunrise, Green Defenders, Haymarket Books, Institute for Policy Studies, and B-Day 1 Billion Rising. This is an incredible coalition. So do watch, do share. My thanks to everyone. What a humbling experience to be with you all. Really humbling, and love all round. And we'll see you in the streets with our potatoes.
Thank you.
Yeah.